I think it's like late fall, the water's getting cool. He put a glove on his foot and we surfed for like 4 hours like that. Maybe just go to the ocean and watch the waves. I think if you can read a wave, you'll progress a lot quicker. I've had a couple of close calls. For like 2 minutes, like I thought I was gonna die.
All right. Hey everyone, we have my buddy Cory, who is I'm super excited to have here. We actually met down in Central America surfing this perfect right point, which we're not going to name, but it randomly turned out that the guy that I was surfing with ended up happened to be basically the mayor of Nova Scotia in some ways. A true Arctic explorer, like goes and surfs all these crazy waves all to himself. It's pretty amazing. I haven't met many people that have done that much exploring of uncrowded waves. I mean, we're going to get into it, but the stories that Cory was telling me were just pretty wild. And just to show how, I guess, how his level of knowledge is, when Surfline went up to Nova Scotia to figure things out, Cory was one of the people that they hit up. So definitely a man of many skills, and definitely the person to hit up if you're ever going to go to Nova Scotia. I'm supposed to go up to visit him. I wasn't able to do it this fall, but
you're welcome whenever you want.
Excited to do it. Yeah, me and Ryan are definitely going to do that sometime. Well,
hurricane season is the warmest
season. That's the warmest time, dude. We just got snow down here. Did you get any snow today?
We did, actually, our second one of the year. So yeah, everybody was, forgot how to use their winter driving skills because they haven't used it since really last year, but it's been warm. And really
do you guys actually have snow on the ground? For us, it was just like a little sprinkle here in Brooklyn.
We might have got 3 inches.
Oh, so proper snow. Now you got the Christmas vibes.
Just enough to make, the driving a hassle. And, if you got anywhere to go, it takes you 4 times as long, but we should be used to it up here, but not this year. It's been weird, oddly warm. So
do you have like what kind of rig do you have to get around in the snow?
A 3/4 ton truck.
That's probably the way to go.
Yeah,
4-wheel drive, winter tires, chains, and all that when you need it.
And we live up on a hill too, like overlooking the ocean, so you got to pay for that view. And sometimes you wake up, you have snow on the ground, which is fine, and then you get a warm front comes through, and next thing you know, your driveway's a sheet of ice, and you're scrambling to try to figure out how you're going to get down the driveway without putting your vehicle in the woods. So there's you got to pay to have the view, I guess.
Pay to have the view, pay to live in a place where you got tons of crazy waves, and it's relatively it sounds like, from what you're telling me, it's pretty uncrowded. But let's actually start at the beginning. Just kind of curious, how did you get into surfing? We'll start there, and then we'll kind of end up getting into more of your exploration stuff. But we'll start with how you got into surfing. Yeah.
I think it was like, excuse me, it was probably like right out of high school. I got out of high school, and my father owns a welding company, so I ended up working with him, and there's a guy at work there, and we became friends, and he surfs, and just seemed like the right thing to do. So what did I do? Went on eBay and found the smallest surfboard I could find, and in a 5'4" wetsuit, and that's where I started.
You started with the smallest surfboard you could find.
I made the same mistake that anybody with, I don't know, a young kid with an ego has, and I just wanted to be on something that looked cool, but I didn't have really anybody else to tell me different. So, or maybe I did, maybe I just didn't listen. I don't know, but I wish I had my knowledge now. I would have started on something much bigger and easier. But me being pig-headed and stubborn, I stuck it out.
Yeah. That is a very common mistake that people make. They jump into too small of a board. They spend so much time floundering around. They could have accelerated their progression. But...
Exactly. Yeah. I know. I made that mistake, and I don't let other people do it. Not if I can persuade them not to. But
yeah. So did your friend throw you right straight into like winter surfing, or did you like surf in the summer first, or in the fall, and then?
I think I started in the summer, and then it was like one of those things. Like I did it when it was warm, and then winter kind of set in, and I did it a little bit. And I remember my buddy calling me. He's like, "Hey, you want to go surfing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do, but I got to go dig my wetsuit out of the snowbank." And I remember digging it out of the snowbank, and I probably didn't buy the top of the line suit back then. I remember it being not that enjoyable, and so like probably for the first like year or two, it was kind of like off and on, and then I probably started progressing, and then I think progression is really what drove me to do it.
Right. That's when you really get hooked, when you see the potential and you start improving.
And then I'm like, oh my God, we got all these amazing waves around here, and and that and progression and exploring made me want to do it more so than most people. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said you started when you just got out of high school.
It's probably like 17, I think.
You're 17, and then so how long ago was that? I mean, you're 35.
Oh, I'm 35 now, so yeah.
That was a good while ago. What was it like surfing back then? I mean, you're already talking about surfing in Nova Scotia, which is going to be uncrowded relative to like most places on the East Coast or California.
Most places,
but then you even
definitely
period, right?
Yeah.
And then you rewind in time even further. There probably were even less surfers and less knowledge about surfing. So what was that like?
There was. There's always been people around surfing. If you want to go to, Lawrencetown or Cow Bay, kind of the places close to town. On a good day, I mean, you could surf with 20 people. But if you want to get off the beaten path, and I mean, Nova Scotia is just like there's points everywhere. I mean, you can drive for a half an hour in a car and you could pass 20 or 30 different points that, maybe not all of them be good, but I bet you half of them or 3/4 of them are good. So it's like you kind of, if you want to surf close to town, you can surf with people just like anywhere else, like probably,
Yeah.
But if you want to just drive a half an hour or 20 minutes, and you can literally surf with you and your buddy, and, cobblestone point breaks with, they're not hard to find around here.
So how did it start for you though? The exploration part of it, like, is that something everybody does, or was it something that you maybe you had some kind of adventure that made you get that bug? Like, how did it start for you?
It started just because I lived in a place, like I lived down the end of the road, but I didn't really surf there. I just kind of knew the local breaks, and then I started looking around like where I lived, and I'm like, holy, like there's good waves here and there's good waves there, and then it led me to Google Earth, which is, I still find myself just gazing at all these cobblestone points, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what that looks like on this day with this wind and that, and it just became a little bit of an addiction. And I'd find myself just cruising through Google Earth, looking at all these setups, and I'm just slowly kind of checking them off the list. There's so many of them though.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I think just being aware of what's around me, led me to want to find what's there. And next thing you know, you're driving a half an hour, and then you're driving an hour, and then it's like, okay, well, I already seen this point and this point, and then eventually you're just, you're 4 or 5 hours up the coast one direction, and it just, and you find sometimes you strike out, but the more knowledge you gain to like kind of realize why these places break, then the odds of you scoring, is high, because you know what to look for. You need deep water for the most part, not too deep though. But you're looking for certain things on the ocean floor, and eventually, you can look at it. You can look at Google Earth or a map, and you kind of get a general idea. But then there's a kicker too. So, like, I've found multiple waves in places that, you wouldn't even think. You can look at a map and see a cobblestone point, and you look at it and say, there's got to be a good wave there. There has to be. It has the perfect contour. Maybe it has a nice headland for, blocking, offshore winds or whatever it may be. But then, like, I've stumbled on many waves that, you just never would have thought there would have been waves there. So it's kind of, it's that's what makes it fun too, because I just look at a map.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Maybe there's like some crazy refraction going on that's kind of driving the swell and making it wrap around or something like that. Is what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Going back to what I said, like you can look at a cobblestone point from Google Earth and say, yeah, there's, chances are there's good waves there, but excuse me. But other times it's just a wave that kind of breaks in a place that you would never think. So that's also what kind of keeps me interested, because it's not just always laid out in front of you like exactly like you would think.
So was there like a first time though that you properly scored and you were just like, and it just opened your eyes to the potential and what made you start exploring? Was there anything like one moment or one experience or maybe a couple of experiences that made you think like that?
There's definitely one that stands out in my mind. Me and my buddy, which is, he's pretty knowledgeable himself. We drove 2 hours north, and it was a wave that I heard about, and we got there, and it was literally flat. Like you couldn't even like an ant might be able to surf. Maybe like it was like 6 inches high, and we're sitting there, and it's like, and literally like in front of our eyes, like it went from flat to like 3-4 feet, and then next thing you know, it's like 6 foot. Next thing you know, you look out, it's like 8 foot perfect waves breaking down this cobblestone point. So we're like, we're the only ones there, and it's like,
oh man,
it literally looked like J Bay as a left, like. So we're like getting our gear out and stuff, and it's like, I think it's like late fall, so the water's like, getting cold. Boots and gloves, probably like either a good 4.3 or, maybe with a hood. The water's getting cool, and he's scrounging. He's looking for he can't find his boot, and next thing you know, he's like, I left my boot at home. So he he put a glove on his foot, and we surfed for like 4 hours like that. And he had a glove on his foot. Hey man, when you're out there in the middle of nowhere and you see like J Bay as a left and there's nobody there, you're like, you're gonna figure out a way to go. That was so wild. That was one of the trips that really made me think like I got to keep this search going, and that's what I've been doing. That was probably 12 years ago, or more.
Wow.
Yeah, and ever since then, it's been Nova Scotia. It's a big province. I mean, you drive one end or the other, you're looking at 10 to 12 hours. Mm-hmm. So you can cover a lot of coastline. Like you can go down south, you can go way up north, and then you can actually go on like the north facing shorelines, which I haven't touched on too much yet, but that's kind of like my next area that's kind of untouched for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
and I just love the that story you're telling me. I just love the adventure aspect of it. It's such a different experience to be like, all right, you're going to go to your local break and it's going to be pumping and there's going to be 40 other dudes there, and
exactly.
It's going to be great, but you also know it's kind of a known quantity. Now, of course, maybe the waves are going to be a little bit better, the shape is going to be better, whatever it might be, but it's a very different thing when there's that unknown and that possibility. That to me is like the most magical thing. And it's crazy that you have the opportunity to just do it all the time, when I think about the modern surfer, the modern surfer's version of exploration is like, all right, we're going to go to a well-established spot that we haven't been to. Okay, we're going to go to a different country, but generally you're going to go to a spot that because you read about it, you've heard about it, there's a resort there. But it's a totally different thing when it's like, I don't even know if there's going to be a wave. I don't even know if it's going to be breaking. I don't know how this thing breaks. And then you just roll up and you roll the dice and you cross your fingers, and then maybe you score, maybe you don't, right?
Yeah.
It must be It
definitely started out where when I was on these trips, like the chances of scoring were probably less then. Now it's just, I kind of know what to look for,
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely like, I probably spend less time actually striking out, I guess. Like now I just have such a better understanding for it, know what to look for, knowing, like seeing the fetch of the storm, like looking at the period and the direction. And it's just like, now it's a pretty good bet. Like, there's not too many times that I go somewhere and completely strike out. Sometimes it might be better than others, but for the most part, we're surfing, chances are pretty good waves, So.
Which is interesting, because I would imagine if you're going and exploring new spots that you get skunked all the time, but it sounds like you've figured it out. So like, what's your process? How do you figure out, like, how do you find these new spots? How do you figure out what's going to make them work? Like, what's your process?
Swell size, sometimes, like, if it's a really big swell, like sometimes you don't always want to be out at the front of a point, Sometimes you want to be inside, somewhere where the swell's bending in and cleaning up. And, so it's about like knowing the quality of the swell. Like if that swell's coming into offshore wind and it's been offshore all night, and I know like that is going to be nice groomed swell, then like to go to some place that's more exposed, like you're going to get good waves. But if it's kind of like, there's some wind, stuff mixed in with that swell and it's really big and kind of just like overpowered, then maybe you want to look for a place with a little more refractory and a little more bend and so that swell has time to clean up, as it comes in. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of knowing the conditions and knowing, like, looking at your local buoys and, looking at your period and just more or less like knowing where, if there's a secondary chop on it, you want to be away from that, somewhere that's not getting that secondary chop, So it's, it's just really about looking at the charts and understanding them, I guess,
Yeah. And so how do you dial it all in though? So, I mean, I'm assuming you use like Surfline probably to figure out what the swells are going to be. You might use Windy to track like the storm and what the direction of the storm, how far it sits off the coast, how much it moves in, and then the wind forecast. And then you're checking the buoys as well, like real time, to be like, all right, how big are these? What is the buoy actually doing?
Yeah.
What are the waves actually doing? And then you're kind of triangulating it from all that. But is there anything else that I'm missing, or anything that you would add there in terms of your process? And then just looking at the swell direction.
Direction is key.
With the way
direction's key. Nova Scotia is kind of like bent in the middle. So like where I actually live, we kind of face like kind of south to southwest. But then if you go south, like it actually bends in the middle, so they face more east, right? So if there's like a big east swell, I can kind of look at the map and being like, well, it's kind of like too side on for like initially where I'm at, so I'm going to go down there. Like, you know what I mean? It's all about just directions. But then there's places that I surf, like, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. Like there's a place down like on the Seoul shore, and it literally faces southwest, but it's like a magnet for east swell. I don't know. I don't know if there's like an underground channel or what there is, or just how it comes in. And it kind of like another thing I look for too is like if like your swell angle and you look at maybe like there's some, it's like coming into a cove or something, and you look and it kind of like compresses the swell, like, you know what I mean? Like like picture like a swell coming into like a triangle, like something like that. So when it comes in, it's kind of like compressing, right? So then if like you have that effect and then you have, say, a reef or a point in there, a lot of times that swell is magnetized because it's getting pushed or compressed into a cove or a body of water, right? So I've had a lot of luck with that, just like looking at it, like, because it's really not that complicated. They're vibrations, right? So if you just kind of have an idea how it's like, it'd be like dropping a stone in the middle of the pond. When you drop it, the waves start out close together, and as they dissipate or spread out, they get just like your period, it stretches out, right? But I just look for things that will sometimes compress swell. Like I found a lot of good waves that way, just like trying to understand like why the swell moves in like that and then why it compresses. So once you understand that, you can kind of, compare to other spots and like it, I've had good luck with that process, just like that kind of the compression of the swell.
So does Google Maps though allow you to look at the bathymetry of the contours of the land underneath, or are you just kind of eyeballing it and being like, all right, it probably is getting compressed there?
I used a program, I think it was called Navionics, and it was basically like it gave you like charts of all, the bottom, right? So I remember I used to have two iPads. One would be Google Earth, and then I'd have another one, a second one, and be Navionics, and I'd kind of just go down the coast, and I found a lot of like kind of like slabby waves that way, like because you could tell where the deep water is, and I started being like, I got to check here, I got to check there, and then come to find out, got like a small handful of guys been going to these spots, so like I just found them just from looking at the bottom basically and being like, okay, there's a really like deep to shallow area here. Like there has to be something. Sure enough, I started going to these places and they were, some of the heaviest waves around.
Right.
And
right.
I just found that simply from looking at Navionics really. So.
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't realize there was a tool that allowed you to do that, but it makes total sense. I mean,
it's pretty cool.
You think about, that's basically how Nazare works. You have this channel, this that just funnels all that swell, and then it goes right into like it's like a hammer and an anvil, and it's just like boom. I was there. I went and saw it when it was like 70 foot. It was the gnarliest thing, dude. It was so gnarly.
I hand it to those guys. It's just the level those guys are on is just insane. Like I'm not going to pretend I'm Superman or anything, but when it's big around here or big to me, I'll go out. But when I have that in the back of my mind, what people are doing and what they're surfing, like a 10 to 12 foot wave seems pretty, okay.
Well, the funniest thing for me though, honestly, okay, so I'm like, there's that lighthouse. So we walk, you walk down this hill, you go down to the lighthouse, and it just looks like skyscrapers, just slow motion collapsing on each other. You're just like, what the heck? That doesn't even look real. It looks like a ninth wonder of the world or whatever. Then you get down to the lighthouse and you start to see it close up. And then you kind of look at it and you're kind of like, it kind of almost looks kind of soft. And then you just feel the energy and you're just like, oh man, I really want to do that. Like, but obviously, like, you're going to die if you do it. But there's a part of you, anyway, for a part of me that's like, oh, man, that would be so cool to do that one day. But you're also like, no, I'm terrified. This looks ridiculous. And then, so I went down. I was with my buddies, Joey and Nick. Went down. We were like, all right, well, we're looking down at it. Let's go down to shore. So I walk down, and then we get to shore. And then, and the funny part is when I was looking down, there's a little part of me that's like, maybe someday. And then I get down to shore and I see it's like 30-foot white waters, 20-foot white waters.
I can't imagine.
And I was just like, nah.
You're like, I don't feel very good.
Yeah. I think I'm going back up. And then, so I'm sitting there and then I just see like, again, just 20-foot white waters. I'm looking at that and I'm just like, wait a minute. I think I see like 2 skis coming in. I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm going to see some big wave surfers coming in, right? And then I realize these 2 skis coming in. I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
They're boats.
They're not actually, they're skis, but there's no one on the skis.
Oh, no. Oh, shit.
So then the 2 skis wash up on shore and we're like, whoa, what happened to the riders? And then we see 2 dudes floating and then they but then I notice as they get close, I'm just like, wait a minute, they're not moving.
Oh God.
I'm like, oh my God, like what happened? So they get closer to shore. As they get right up to shore, one of them stands up and stumbles up. He's barely able to get
exhausted,
up, but he's just like exhausted. He's just worked, right? And he like walks up. The other guy floats up to shore, but is just so wasted. He can't even stand up. He just and then he gets sucked back out. And then that's when everybody ran because they were like, oh my God, this guy's getting sucked back out again.
Yeah.
he starts swirling around, and then they run out there, they grab him, they come back in, they lift him up, they see him like, I do see him cough like a gallon of seawater or whatever, and then he just like collapses back down, and then they put him on an ambulance and took him out, and I was just like,
oh,
whoa,
heavy,
gnarly,
heavy,
dude,
yeah,
so heavy.
And that's probably
I think he's
he probably trains, and it's probably his life, right? So
right,
for just a normal surfer to go out there, it's just crazy.
God, yeah.
Like I just how do people get to that point where they're comfortable with going out when it's 80 feet? It just blows my mind.
Right. They're superhuman, man. I mean, it's super gnarly.
Like a lot of my friends are like, "Oh, would you ever go on that?" And I'm like, I don't even like. I'm like, no. That those guys are a different breed. Like I was like, there's surfing, and then there's big wave surfing. Like it's like almost an entirely different thing. It's like bungee jumping to skydiving. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like. It's interesting when you think about the analogies and the differences in types of surfing. They're all the same sport, but they're very different. Like high performance surfing versus big wave surfing. It's almost like a different sport, right? And then the way the people are too, and the culture of it is very different.
Yeah.
And then it's also a similar thing with what you do, where you're exploring versus just going to your same break. Let's say you're going to just surf trestles or whatever, and you're just doing that over and over. It's this high performance approach, which I love. Obviously everybody wants to get good. Yeah. But then there's also this, I'm going to go and explore, And it's super interesting because I think about the corollary. One of my other passions is climbing. And so in climbing, you got the gym climbers, the boulders who are indoors, and they're just like pure performance. They're just trying to get as strong as possible and be as dynamic as possible. But then you got the guys that are, the pinnacle of climbing is going out and doing first ascents on like gnarly big mountain ranges. Yeah. And that's kind of like what you're doing. You're going out in the wild, you're going with just a buddy or two, and you're going out and you're like, I don't know what we're going to find, but we're going to go and try and get some.
At least you can check it off the list, If it's no good, you're like, okay, well, chances are, maybe it is good. But a lot of times if a spot's no good, if you know when to go typically and it's no good, chances are you can check it off the list because the bottom's not right or whatever it may be. But I think surfing's only like a quarter of it for me. Like I love exploration so much. It's just so rewarding. And I've seen a lot of surfers come and go, and it's like, they're surfing the same longboard wave every day. And it's like, it would get old,
Yeah.
And you never know what's going to be around the next bend, so you might as well go check it out.
Yeah, you got that adventure mentality, which I totally respect. I get it. It's so cool. Because and I think the thing about it as well that I find interesting is the human aspect of it as well, where you're going on an adventure with a buddy.
Oh, there's nothing better. There's nothing better.
Yeah, that is what makes it cool. Like the two, couple guys, and girls or whatever it might be, and then you just go out and like try to experience something new versus like with a big pack. It's the same thing with climbing as well. Like, climbing at the gym, hanging out with a bunch of people, it's social versus like going on a mission with some people. And that's why I got to come up to Nova Scotia and surf with you out there, man.
You do. There's nothing better than leaving at like 4 a.m. and you got all your gear and you stop at the gas station, get some snacks, and you just, you and your buddy are chatting, and it's a coastal drive, so you're seeing waves break here and there, and like you're in the middle of nowhere. Like it's I don't know. Well, I'm sure like it'd be a culture shock for you, and it'd be a culture shock for me to go to New York, but. It's just like old little fishing villages and just places that you would typically never go. It brings you to these places, and that's why I love it, because like I tell people and they're just like, oh yeah, they're non-surfers, hockey players, and they listen to me and put up with me. I talk about it because I'm passionate about it, but they don't really understand. But the people that do, they share the same love as me, and I have a small knit group that we just love it. Like that's what we want to be doing. That's when life started feeling short to me, is when I fell in love with surfing. A lifetime doesn't seem long enough,
That's so awesome. That's a great way to live, man.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, it's Van. Hopefully you've been enjoying the podcast. Hopefully you've been listening to some good stories, getting some good tips that are helping you improve as a surfer. If so, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review. It'll only take you literally a few seconds, and share it with your friends. That's the best way you can support me, so I can continue to create awesome new content for you. So thanks. Yeah, you just end up having this like intimate relationship with nature that's totally different. Like, you could just be watching something, but it's another thing to like, I'm going to play in this thing. It's
yeah.
So cool.
I'm going to become, it's just like, it amazes me, it's like this wave or this whatever vibration it's going to break there no matter if you're there or not. Like there could be completely nobody. It could be a fly on a tree branch witnessing this wave break, but you have to time it all. Like surfing is just so much timing. Everything's timing, from when you go to like when you paddle, like knowing which way the wave's going. And it's just like, yeah, you got to make it all work. And it's just, I'm fascinated by it still after surfing for as long as I have,
Yeah, totally. So question,
yeah,
adventure means reward, but there's also risk involved. We were just talking about big wave surfers and all that.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever gotten into any gnarly situations? Like,
definitely.
Like you're going to surf in this new spot. You have no idea what's on the bottom. You don't know what the rip is going to be. The swell might be big. Like,
yeah, I've had a couple of close calls. For like 2 minutes, like I thought I was going to die. Like when I was pretty young in my surfing career, or whatever you want to call it. I just went to a place that I just shouldn't have been there at the time, and ended up eating it on a wave, and then losing my board, and then getting sucked out to sea. And at one point I was like, I might actually. It's the only time in my life that I was like, I'm getting sucked out. I was tired. I was like, and it was like in the middle of a storm. It wasn't even like, it wasn't good conditions. It was just, I don't know, just lack of knowledge. I went out and I was gassed, and I was getting sucked out, and for 2 to 3 minutes, man, like I was like, I might not come back from this. And and I end up getting washed. Like what happened was I was caught in the channel, and I was getting sucked out, and that's when I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get back in the shore. Like I don't know how I'm going to get in the shore. And then I ended up washing. I got pushed out of the channel, and now I'm like in front of rocks, and of course that was a new, I knew I wasn't getting sucked out, but now there's new like dangers. I'm like, okay, now I got to try not to like get smashed onto the rocks. So I remember I had my back to the land, and I was watching these waves come in. And at this point, I knew I was gonna make it to shore. I just had to be very careful how I went about and did it. So I remember going under, and it kept pushing me closer and closer. And then I remember one wave was coming, and I went to go under, and I remember my chest hitting the bottom, and I'm like, oh, like shit, like it's getting to the point where I'm not going to be able to go under anymore because I'm going to be on the rocks. So, and then it just pushed me up to the side of the rocks, and then like literally like a swell came in and kind of like pushed me up onto the rocks, and I remember I just scurried onto the rocks, and I just ran. As soon as I got up there, I ran. And there was like 4 or 5 dudes watching me, and they were kind of white. They're like, "Oh my god, my board was smashed to smithereens on the rocks." And but I felt good when I seen the rocks. I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna make it.
You're close.
I'm gonna make it in the shore." Like at that point, I didn't even care really. I just knew I wasn't in the riptide anymore. But for that like 2 to 3 minutes when I was in that riptide, like I was like, it's like finding a needle in the haystack, out there. It was like 15-foot swell, 15-foot swell, and like it was stormy. It wasn't even like an offshore day. It was just, I shouldn't have been there. Wrong place, wrong time, and like I'd just never be out there now. I'd be somewhere else, So
right, and you got all this heavy rubber. You're probably just getting tired.
Oh my god! Like this year, like we had a warm year, and as you know, I went to El Salvador for a couple weeks, and then I came back, and I was in like a 4-3. So And then like I remember going to I didn't have a 5.4, so I just kind of went from my 4.3 or my 3.2 to like my now 5.4 or my 6.5, and I'm like, oh my god, like I literally blew my first like 10 waves. Like it's just it takes a while. What do you have down in New York? Do you have a 5.4 or you don't go 6?
I have a 5.5, like 4 right now. That's
Okay.
like the thickest wetsuit I wear.
Yeah.
I mean, it is usually more than enough for the winter, but I have thought about getting a 6.5 just for like the early morning, and then I have like a 5.4 for the afternoon. But
Yeah. What does your water?
you know, sometimes
What does your water
Sorry?
go down to there? Like,
I don't even remember, like 30s.
Yeah.
Honestly, I just go by like, I mean, I know that it's gotten so cold that it's turned to slush.
I've
The
seen
water's
that here
turned to slush
before too, a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just know basically in the wintertime, I'm like, all right, I want to be in a 5.4. That's pretty much the way I roll. So
Yeah.
it's kind of funny. You can almost get away with just having a 3.2 and a 5.4 in New York because it's like
Gets really warm in the summer out here. Like,
yeah, you're trunking it in the summertime.
yeah, I know when my buddies came up from Rhode Island, they were telling me, I was like, they said they were trunking it. But the water was warm up here too. I think it was almost 70. And then we went up north and I think it was like 72. It was really warm.
Yeah.
That's warm for here, for sure.
Right. Yeah, and just going back though, talking about that experience where you lost your leash. I mean, personally, that's also the scariest situations that I've been in is when I lose my leash. I'm usually not too scared of like hitting the reef or whatnot. I mean, because I've learned my lesson. I nearly lost my eyeball one time, but I covered my face.
Oh, I seen that.
Generally,
I seen that.
Yeah. But
was that reef or board?
That was my board. I was down deep in Mexico when that happened. But one of the scarier experiences I had was I was surfing this reef in Pacific, and basically it's on a tiny island, and it was the last day of the swell, and it was the day I was leaving too. I was leaving in the afternoon, so I was like, let me get a little window warning. It was the last day I was going to surf, but it was the beginning of the swell. So I'm sitting there I get there, I'm on a board. I had a ding on it, so I'm like doing the ding repair, and then I see this guy roll up. He has a gun, and I'm like, why does he have a gun? It doesn't look that big. I'm like, it doesn't look that big. And I talked to him, and I think his name was John or something. I was like, what's up? What's going on, man? We were just chatting it up, and he's like, yeah, I think the swell's building, so I brought this thing. I was like, man, you seem like overgunned. Why? You don't need that thing. It looks like, a little bit overhead right now. I'm waiting for my board to cure and whatnot. Then, to sun cure. Then more people start rolling up, and then the swell starts to build. And I'm like, and I look at it, I'm like, all right, it's getting pretty big now, right? And then, so the way it's set up, there's like this channel that kind of goes to the left, but then there's like a bunch of gnarly reef right here, and then the break, you paddle around the channel, and then it breaks right here as mostly rights, but there's super hollow, crazy lefts, but you're going to end up in some gnarly stuff.
Yeah.
So, they all paddle out there. Finally, my board is ready, and I'm looking out there. I'm like, man, it's really big now. I don't know if I should go out. I got to catch a flight, but I'm going to try to catch one. So I paddle out there, and then as I'm paddling out, I see a guy swimming in. I'm like, what happened, dude? He's like, oh, I lost my board. And I was like, all right, you going to be okay? And he's like, yeah, I'll be fine. And then I see another guy paddling in. He lost his board, swimming in. I get out there. I'm sitting there, and it's like proper bombing. I'm like proper, like kind of spooked, And then I'm like, and I'm looking around. I was like, where's John on his gun? So I ask around. I was like, oh, yeah, John lost his board. And I'm like, but where is he? He's like, well, he got sucked in a rip, and he's all the way around.
Oh, no.
We don't know where he is right now. And this spot is like all jagged reef. And so we just don't know where he went. And I still don't know if he's okay. I'm assuming he's okay. But I think he got sucked into the rip and just got floated out there. And I was like, okay, he's proper. I mean, 3 guys have lost their boards.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, do I try and catch one in, or do I just try to paddle in, But I'm like, oh, dude, I'm here. This is my last day.
Yeah.
I gotta go for one. Paddle for it, missed it, and then the next one came and just obliterated me. Like, I had a t-shirt on and just ripped my t-shirt around my head. I was just like spinning underwater with my arms like all tattered up.
Yeah.
Get back up, and I'm like, all right, I'm going in. I'm just gonna paddle in. So I start paddling in. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be fine. Next thing I know, I'm back in the impact zone because like there's so much water pushing into the channel that it was sucking out again. So I was like back in the impact zone, got smashed again. And then I'm just like, all right, I really got to book it to get back in. And like I made it in, but it was like so gnarly. So anyway.
Yeah. I've been there a few times as well. Yeah. There's a few spots around here that get fairly large. You know, I'm not like a Hawaiian guy. I don't typically like to do that. It's 8 foot when it's actually 15 foot or whatever they do. But I've seen like 15-foot faces here for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you're so close to the storms. Like
the storms
that would come through.
Exactly. Like, yeah. Definitely. There's definitely a handful of spots that there's some spots you don't even go to. Just I don't know when it's 15-foot top to bottom, breaking like pipeline. I'll just go find a nice, perfect cobblestone point somewhere. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I've seen some of those pictures you showed me. Yeah. Like, you're saying cobblestone. There's some like hollow waves.
Oh, there is. There's cobblestone barrel and point breaks too. I mean, there's lots of that. Then there's lots of just rippable, open face, really fun waves as well. It's all what you want. You can find pretty much anything you want here. Just what do you want, you know?
Wait, so I have a question for you.
Sure.
You told me that there's a break that was named after you. How did you end up getting the name of why did this break get named after you? Like, what was the deal with that?
It's pretty like close to my house, and we were just surfing it one day, and one of my buddies was like, man, Cory's bedroom out here, because I was just always out in that area, and it just kind of stuck. And it's called Cory's bedroom now. So,
wait, is that the picture that you sent me?
Yeah, that one. I was paddling back out, and there's that big right point break. It's kind of like it's not even really a point. It's kind of like a reef / point break, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it holds a really big swell out there too. I've been very terrified out there a few times.
Okay, well, I have it. I pulled it up. Let me just show everybody. Let's all take a look at this thing right here. That thing looks.
Yeah, if you look in the left-hand corner, like you can see me paddling back out, and the waves quite a ways behind me. So, you know, it's probably 12-foot faces maybe that day.
Man, that looks so good.
Yeah.
I would. You're goofy, aren't you? I would have thought you'd pick a left.
Oh man, I go either way.
Yeah, you go either way, huh? You got it good.
We get there's pretty much a rule of thumb around here. Like, if there's any east in the wind, we typically go left. Like if it's northeast, you just go like there's like a bunch of different left-hand point breaks you can go to.
Yeah.
And if it's northwest or west, you surf right. And we get a lot of west wind in the winter, so we surf a lot of rights. So
it just depends what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. Nice. We had a good run over. When was it? A couple of weeks ago, we had a good run of northeast wind, and I think I surfed for like 4 or 5 days, probably all overhead waves and great laughs. Yeah,
that sounds great.
Man,
wait, so how do you guys? I mean, we have our tactics, but you guys have a whole different level of cold up there. Like, what are your tips for cold water where you're like 6'5" and it's like freezing cold? Like, how do you guys stay warm? Any tips?
Honestly, it's all about your prep. Like, you know, if I know I'm going to get cold, like chances are if it's cold out, like you're not going to go out there and unless you're working really hard, you're not going to go out there and get warmer. It's typically one of those things where you start out, your body temperature is nice and warm, and then, you know, as you're out there for an hour, and then 2 hours and 3 hours, like your body temperature is dropping. So it's like a game of, you know, I might sit in my vehicle for 45 minutes and kind of almost break out in the sweat before I go out and surf, you know?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. Like, you know, my suit's always like close to the heat. I have my boots sitting up on the dash, and they're getting warm, and my gloves, and it's all about staying warm before you get out there.
Yeah.
Because your core temperature is going to drop.
Right.
So,
do you have a setup so you can change in your car, or do you change in the snow?
I typically have like a dry bro, but I'm sure you've seen them.
Yeah,
it's
I have
like
one of
it's
those.
like almost a super long. Yeah, okay. It's like a super long coat. So typically, I'll just like normally 9 times out of 10, I'll just drive myself. So like the passenger seat's open. I normally just, it's quite a large truck, so I normally like I'll get changed in there normally. I'll get my bottom half on, and then I'll kind of get out and then pull my upper half on, and then right back into the truck.
Yep.
And then you put your boots and gloves on, and then you take the plunge. But it's all about like, you can't be standing out in the snow and getting cold before you're going to go surf. Like it's all about doing it quickly, and then keeping your body temperature up, and then going.
Yeah. No, that's smart. I used to have my car before. I had a Honda Element, so you could like wash out the interior. So I would change in my car, and then I would bump the heat beforehand, so I'm totally fine. And then afterwards, I had like a whole bucket, like a big tub, and then like waterproof stuff, and I could change out of my wetsuit in there as well.
Oh no!
But now that I have like a nicer car, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I hear ya. It's hard. Typically, I'll put like 9 times out of 10, I just get changed beside the vehicle. Like when I'm getting out, I'm really fast at it now.
Yeah.
Not because I want to be, because like I don't know. I'm sure when you take your mitts off, it's not long, and your hands are like they almost don't work. Like, and you're trying to get your 6 mil suit off, and your thumbs are bending back, and it's not for the faint of heart, but. I was born in Canada, so what else do I do? It's just normal to me. Like, people are like, "Oh my God, you're going surfing," and they think I'm weird because I'm going surfing. Well, I think they're weird for not surfing.
Well, it's funny because I was just hanging out with my buddy. He's from Hawaii, and he was telling me, he was like, "Yeah, the first time I went winter surfing, like my hands got so cold, I couldn't even take my gloves off because they just turned into ice blocks." And he's sitting out there and it's freezing cold. And he was like, I legit had a panic attack because I didn't know how I was going to get my gloves off, and I was freezing my butt off. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
He grew up in Hawaii, so that's the problem. That's his problem.
It's all what you're used to. I don't know. Like every person I talk to, I'm like, oh yeah, you got to come up to Nova Scotia surfing, and their famous answer is, I don't like the cold, and I'm like, wow. I mean, you're from Mexico. I can understand.
Yeah, but it'll be worth it to score like uncrowded perfect points. And
it's so true. Like they have lots of good waves down there too, obviously, but they don't have the multiple point breaks to choose from. They get a lot of swell down that Pacific coast, but they don't have, and that's probably the reason why we have all these point breaks, is because, we're not getting, 6 feet by 20 seconds on a regular basis. If we did, chances are, all our points would be eroded too. But yeah, that's what you got to look at, right? Because that's why we have all these good point breaks, because we don't have the erosion that they have there. So
interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
I never even thought about that, but that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So actually circling back as well, I was thinking about, because you have you were saying 40 different points.
Yeah.
And you have 1 million swell directions and potential wind directions.
Yes.
How do you keep track of it all? Do you have a surf log where you what do you do?
That's becoming the issue now. I'm like, oh Jesus, I forget what tide this wave works on. It's normally up in my head, but now it's getting to the point where I'm just getting too many waves. I got to start writing it down. That's actually a thing I've been thinking about, starting a surf log. In the last year, I've been really thinking about it. And I think I'm going to have to do it because I'm having a hard time keeping. I know what winds and what directions typically for the swell, but it's I can't remember the tides, and and in certain there's magical numbers for every surf break, as you know.
Right.
And yeah, it's becoming a chore to try to remember all of them. I got help from some of my buddies too, because but it's definitely becoming an issue.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm surprised with all that different variety you got that you haven't been doing the surf logs. I mean, for us, it's like impossible too, because it's like we have mostly beach breaks in New York and New Jersey.
Yeah.
So it'll be like, one year it could be a good high tide spot, and the next year it's like mid tide or low tide or whatever, So it's like a constant guessing game. And like I'll go down, I'll be like, I'm sure this is going to be good here, and then it's like, oh no.
Well, everything, sand moves around.
I know.
That's we have a few decent beach breaks, but for the most part, we're like either surfing reef breaks or like cobblestone points, and they really don't change that much,
Yeah.
Like it's not like sand where you get a swell or some water gets pushed around. Next thing you know, you probably maybe you have waves that you haven't even seen break in that area before. It's sand.
Right.
We don't have that. It's more or less just keeping like the swell direction, size, and wind down. But
yeah.
So
I wish I lived next to 40 different points. I'll tell you that.
Like you come experience it sometime. You'll love it,
dude. I'm gonna do it when the water starts to warm up. I mean, heck, we'll see. I'm definitely gonna do it though. I want to have
one thing you have going for you is typically like what to look for at home. Like when it's going to be good at home. 9 times out of 10, when it's good down there, it's going to be good up here.
Yeah.
Too. Not always, but a lot.
Just chase the swell up the coast. Oh.
Exactly. Like it's a pretty good bet when I see pictures like coming from Jersey and it looks good because it's always like a day to 2 days before it hits here.
Right.
I pretty much already know it's going to be good, unless the wind pattern's completely different. But normally it's a good bet. If it's good down there, it's going to be good here.
That's so cool.
So you could like score it at home and then literally hop on an 1.5-hour flight and be up here.
Got to find like a good system to make that worth it, so we can get like, It's
I want to.
Man. We're gonna do.
I want to come down there as well.
Oh yeah.
Like I really do.
For sure.
Like. That's one thing we don't have is a lot of like beach breaks. So, and if they are, they're like kind of, they're rippable waves, but they're not like top to bottom type beach breaks.
Yep.
So I'd really like to check that out sometime.
Yeah. The time to come is going to be in the fall because you can get like good hurricane swell, but then you'll also have like, man, New York in the early fall is like the best time to be in the city. It's so fun. I love the city, but I also love waves, obviously. So that's the perfect time to be in New York, actually.
So like how many people will be surfing on a given day down there when it's good? Like, is it hard to get like on crowded waves or? Well,
it depends when you go. So like it also depends on the size. Once it gets to if we're talking about basically like friendly, like head high waves, overhead waves that are softer and not barreling, that's when it can get really crowded.
Yeah.
Once it starts to properly barrel, then it gets less crowded because it's just a challenging wave.
Yeah.
Now there are going to be certain spots that you'll go to where it's barreling and it's really good, like it's lining up perfectly, and those spots can get very competitive. But you're generally still going to be able to find other spots that are going to be a little bit less crowded and a little bit less competitive. And that's where we're talking about the fall when it's like a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
But then once it turns to winter, if it's cold and it's barreling, there's going to be a lot more opportunities, just because there's so much beach break. And not everybody's going to be. And there's always the spots that are going to be busy, but then there's a lot of spots where you're going to have opportunities. And when it's overhead, you're talking 4 to 5, 6 foot is generally going to be barreling. Almost always is going to be barreling. So it's pretty fun, but it is cold in the winter, obviously. So
I think our weather's probably pretty similar. I think our winter's probably a little longer, but I think for like. Our water doesn't really go below 32 like ever. Like I've seen it a few times, but not really.
Yeah.
Even right now, it's still like I don't know what it is Fahrenheit, but I think it's like 5 degrees Celsius or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is really warm for zero's freezing, so that'd be 32. So
Right.
I'd say it's 4 degrees warmer than it normally is right now.
Wow. That sounds like a lot.
It is, and it's having a big effect on our weather. Like typically, after Christmas, normally we set into winter. Like it'll be winter like from January, February, halfway through March normally. And then after like that, it kind of starts to come around. But I mean, we haven't even had winter yet. It's very weird. Everybody's like this. Even like older people, I always like to pick their brain on the weather, and just because they've been around a long time, and they're like, never, I've never seen anything like this. So I don't know if it's just the year or things are changing. Well, things are changing, but
okay. It is interesting. All right, well, we're gonna work towards finishing up. We've been chatting for a while now. Gonna ask you a couple quick questions.
Sure.
Number one, what are we already talked about some of the biggest mistake that you made earlier when you were younger. What is your best tip for a beginner surfer?
The best tip for a beginner surfer: foam is your friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Just because you're a good snowboarder doesn't mean you're going to be a good surfer.
There are people that think that, for sure.
I think every snowboarder thinks that.
They don't realize the hard part is catching the wave.
Or reading the wave, yeah.
Right.
Maybe just go to the ocean and watch the waves. Because I think if you can read a wave, then you'll have you'll progress a lot quicker.
Right.
Maybe just go and watch. I was just so like head on. I was like, I'm going out and like I'm surfing, and I like just surf everything. Like just surf. Just that's all I did. But if I had stood back and just took a step back and watched the waves and got on a board that suited me versus a 6.0 from California. We call it the potato chip because it's only about that thick.
Yep. Totally.
I think foam is your friend, and just don't let your ego get ahead of you. Like, it's the hardest sport in the world, as far as I think anyway.
For sure.
Yeah.
What about your best tip for an intermediate surfer who's working on maneuvers, trying to get barreled, all that?
The only time you're going to get barreled is when you want to run. You gotta slow down. Like, like somebody asked me the other day, like, how do you get barreled? I'm like, when you're on the part of the wave where you just want to straighten out and run away, that's when you have to just commit. And like, it's such it doesn't feel very natural, like going into something like that, but you just gotta kind of trust yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right? Because as a beginner surfer, you're like trying to be as far away from that powerful part of the wave because you think you're going to get eaten. You're not going to be able to make the section, and you have to like mentally reframe. I need to get more and more critical into a worse and worse situation.
Yeah.
So that is
when you want to straighten out, you got to just like pull in.
Yeah, and you got to take your beating sometimes until you figure it out.
That's definitely part of the process. We've been there, so we know.
Yeah. All right, Cory. Well, thank you so much for joining. This was an awesome chat that I had with you. Lots of good stuff. We got to get a surfing together for sure. Either 100%. You're coming down here, I'm coming up there. We're gonna do it.
You're gonna have me, and then I'm gonna have you, or vice versa. But we'll make sure we get a taste of a little bit of both.
Let's do it.
I want to check it out, and I want to show you around. So.
All right, let's do it. All right.
Thank
Cory.
you so much,
Yeah. Thanks again, man. I'll talk to you later.
Have a good night.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everyone. It's Van. Hopefully you've been enjoying the podcast. Hopefully you've been listening to some good stories, getting some good tips that are helping you improve as a surfer. If so, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review. It'll only take you literally a few seconds, and share it with your friends. That's the best way you can support me so I can continue to create awesome new content for you. So thanks.